with Ryan Lundberg from Austin. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Pretty good. But listen, I want to get into what you do because at the moment you started recently at LULA.
Yes, sir.
And I've seen from your background, is pretty much in the sales development manager, SDR kind of part of the sales pipeline. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So for people listening in, what does an SDR do and how do you go about that process?
Yeah. So first off, I'd say, the SDR is a very, very important role in any software company. It's one of the most challenging roles there is. But man, you can learn a lot doing it. And so I, they're in charge of going after new accounts in most cases, knocking on doors in a sense, spreading the word about the company. And it's just a grind. Like it's a grind, lots of phone calls, lots of messaging, lots of, researching to figure out how do you get in touch with this person? How can I differentiate myself to stand out from the crowd? Because people are hit up all the time. So yeah, it's a challenging role, but yeah, it's a fun one.
There's a number of things I'd love to dig into there. The first being, essentially sounds like the lead generation part of the sales pipeline.
Yep, for sure.
So
we call it top of the funnel.
The top of the funnel.
Yep.
As you said, one of the most important parts, because I was thinking about sales pipelines a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking, there's essentially two parts in my mind. I mean, there's more, but in my head, I was thinking you could bring in, let's say, 100 new leads a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have people that take those leads and convert them into customers via demo.
Mm-hmm.
So if the people you're bringing in, if from those 100 leads, only 10% are actually warm leads. In other words, 10% actually fit like an ICP, ideal customer profile, and there's actually a value proposition from the product you're selling to them, then that's an inefficiency, right? Because 90% of those leads are actually not that good quality. So
for sure,
there's the first part. I guess what you do is bringing in warm leads taking people and converting them into warm leads to pass it on to people later down the pipeline. And then, of course, there's a part later down the pipeline where the person is looking for your product, but they've got competitors, they've got certain constraints, budget, urgency, internal need. So, and then they'll have their own conversion level. So once they're you got those warm leads, how many warm leads are you converting? Like your sales closers and things like that. So, given this, what's the secret, or what's the best methods to kind of ensuring, not even methods, man, more like process. What's the best process to think about it to ensure that the leads that you're bringing in are actually people that could require this product that you're trying to sell?
Yeah. So, it requires a lot of training, your SDRs in a sense, and just teaching them how to be a sales rep at the end of the day. Trying to develop that mindset of like, hey, if you were a deal closer, what would you want to know about this individual before you get them on a meeting? And trying to develop that curiosity mindset for the SDR so that they're qualifying the lead that they're talking to before they even set up the meeting. Like that's crucial. One of the most important things to look at metrics wise is your qualification rates. If it's too high, that can be a sign that like, and when I say too high, I think, depending on the company and what you sell, like, I would say anything more than like 75% qualification rate, like that's like a hey, you're probably leaving stuff out on the table. Like, let's give the AEs more at bats. So you want to take a look at that. And if it's super low, then you know, like, okay, this SDR is having trouble qualifying or bringing good quality to the meeting. So it's really important to keep an eye on that.
How do you find that?
Do what?
How do you go about defining the qualification rate? Like, how do you know that, okay, this lead is now qualified? What defines it?
Yeah. So in the orgs that I've been a part of, when an SDR creates a meeting, they'll create an opportunity. And that opportunity will maybe, let's say it sits in new stage in Salesforce. When the AE has the meeting and decides, hey, this was a good meeting, I'm going to move it to discovery stage or qualification stage, or like basically moving it forward through Salesforce, that's when you would call that a qualified lead.
Okay.
Or a sales accepted opportunity. An SA, a lot of companies call it. And at that point, that's when you recognize that as pipeline that the SDR helped generate.
Okay, so it's basically taking someone who's completely cold initially and then moving them forward to the next stage. Mm-hmm. And then for more clarity and understanding for myself and also for the listeners, what are the stages in a sales pipeline? So because you mentioned a few terms there like discovery and so on.
Yeah. So again, this can all vary by company, right? But for the most part, you'll have, new stage, right? Like we just opened this, we just set up this meeting. Here we go. And then you move it into discovery is usually the next stage, right? Like, okay, cool. This company's interested. We're going to dive in deeper, see who's a good fit, et cetera. Then after discovery, you'll have, again, sometimes it depends on the company, but a qualification, right? Like, so what all do they need in this software? Is it accomplishing what we found in discovery? And then it's like proposal, right? Okay, cool. We figured out exactly what you need. Here's a proposal. Then you've got like a negotiation stage after that, like back and forth. And then you'll have an agreement, like, okay, hey, maybe we got a vocal like agreement. And then some companies will put like, maybe there's a stage for like legal or whatever. Or you just build that into like one of the stages, knowing that your legal and their legal is going back and forth, redlining and all that kind of stuff on the contract. And then hopefully after that, you get a signed contract and it's closed won.
That's time to celebrate, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yep.
So the discovery then, what you're saying to me sounds like you're essentially discovering what problems your potential prospect has. The prospect, what issues they're facing, why they've kind of come to you in the first place, what's attracted them from their perspective. We experience X, Y, Z. And then qualifying that in the next part sounds like you're then looking at ABC that our product has and how we actually meet those needs.
Correct.
So I guess in startup terms or business terms, you're really thinking about what is our value proposition to this particular client.
Yep.
And how important is it to have a clearly defined value proposition before you even go out looking for cold leads?
It's a good question. I mean, it may depend on what you're selling, but I also don't like to make things overly complicated for the SDR. Like I like to keep things pretty simple. Good example is, recently, I just started at LULA. I've been here for a little over or almost 3 months now, I guess. And had my first group of SDRs start a couple months ago, or about a month and a half ago. We did 2 days of training, or I guess 2.5 technically. You could count the morning of. And then that third afternoon, I turned them loose on the phones. Had leads for them. I had lists for them. Turned them loose. And amongst those 4 individuals, we were able to set 9 meetings. And sure, it's important to have a value prop. Obviously we got to get them hooked or interested for some reason. But it's not overly complicated. You don't need to spend weeks of training. Okay, with this persona, like make sure that we really hit on this, and this persona will really hit on that. Like I think overall, just what do you do? How could you help me? Like again, we're just trying to generate interest first. That's what we're selling first, and then let's get them in front of the AE where they can really dive in and really kind of, find those pain points in order to give them the best value prop possible. Because we can't assume going into the call that, I got to talk about this value prop because this is what's going to get them. They may not have a problem with that issue. And for an SDR, it's nerve-wracking to make a cold call anyway. So if I go into a call like with this plan of like, hey, I'm going to talk to them about XYZ, they're really going to like it. I bet they have a problem with it. And then the SDR finds out, oh crap, they don't have a problem with that. Now what do I do? And now they become less confident, awkward on the phone, and they lose it.
Almost takes away that natural flow, right? When you go in with an agenda.
Yep, exactly.
You're no longer in the moment, just kind of absorbing as much information as you can and almost giving the prospect an opportunity to teach you something new of how you could solve a potential problem.
Yeah, one thing I always tell my SDRs usually, and it's usually the ones that have zero experience and stuff, I preach, curiosity. Don't go into the call thinking you need a meeting, because that's when you die. Go into the call just curious to learn more about their company and how they're operating. Mm-hmm. And then if we're a good fit, let's tell them, hey, you know what? Based on our conversation, I think we could help you out. Like, what's your calendar look like tomorrow afternoon at 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's equally powerful when you're able to then listen, be curious, and realize you're not a good fit and turn around to them and say, hey, you know what? Actually, I don't want to waste any more of your time. After given what you just told me, I don't think we're a good fit for you. So we wish you all the best. If we do have some amenability in the future, then maybe we can pick it up then.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you that are listening that may be new to the SDR world, or you're thinking about spinning this up for your startup, you might notice early on the team will set a good amount of meetings, and then it kind of falls off a little bit. And then you might be wondering like, oh man, what happened? We came out the gates like swinging. But really the SDR is just getting better at their job, just figuring out like, oh, you know what? This person's not a great fit. I'm not going to push them to a meeting. Where before they get quote unquote happy ears. Oh, you're interested? Cool. Let's book this meeting right now. And they don't do a whole lot of discovery to figure out like, okay, let me just ask you a few questions to make sure you're qualified or that it makes sense to have this conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty normal.
I'm finding in something interesting here that I want to bring up, right? So, as a founder, most founders, when they are building their business, one thing that they're first told from most startup coaches or people with experience in the startup world is have a clear, defined value proposition for your product so you know the type of customers that you're going to target, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you were to put yourself in the shoes of those individuals, how should they go about looking to essentially do the equivalent of an SDR where they're generating leads? Should they also kind of adopt a spray and pray and then come back to their product and say, hey, maybe I can iterate it? But then what if the time to iterate what they've built is quite long and they've got pretty, fixed product? It does X, it can't do Y.
Right. You mind breaking that down for me a little bit, just so I can make sure I'm on the same page with you on that last part?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you got a 2-person startup team. It's a CEO and it's a CTO. Now, the CTO has built the product, let's say web application for, I don't know, marketing analytics, taking in data from marketing analytics and kind of giving a marketer push requests of kind of keywords to use in their product offering, right? I'm making this up literally off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And then they go out and the CEO's like, all right, now I need to go make sure we can get sales for this thing and generate interest and get valuable feedback to iterate our product value proposition and to make sure that we have a market. But it does this specific thing. It analyzes marketing campaigns and, recommends how to improve them. But then people come back and say, hey, this is useful, but we would prefer if it, didn't just analyze our marketing campaign, but also, because that's not where we have the most problems, but our biggest problems is resales. So we get people in, we have decent customer acquisition cost, but we're struggling to upsell our bigger offerings, because we've got certain products that get people in the door, but we want to now sell the more expensive products once they're already in the door. And that's our biggest problem, not actually attracting the attention at the beginning. So then CEO goes back to CTO and says, hey, look, this is the thing. And then CTO says, look, that's interesting, but it's going to take maybe another 2 to 3 months of development or 6 months to a year of development. Can we go back to the initial value proposition? So in this situation, what would be the strategy you'd recommend? Because we've got a lot, finite resources and, a very small team that only has so much time.
Sure. I think you have the CTO pivot. You've done a good job in finding an area where, hey, our product could do more if it could only do X, right? I think you make that pivot. But at the same time, the CEO should still try and sell what you currently have. And then talk about, hey, right now, this is, what you can see with our software. Hopefully in the next, 3 to 6 months, we'll also be able to show you how the resales are affecting your business. So yeah, I would say that's important. Our company, the one I work for now, started off as a company that was basically an Uber on college campuses, renting cars out. College students would rent their cars out to other college students. And now we are an insurance platform. It's completely different, right? So you never know what you'll stumble into. And so if you've got feedback coming like that from multiple directions and, you can make it happen, go for it. Sorry, I can't hear you now.
Sorry, but I was muted there. I was saying it's funny you say that because as soon as you said college students renting out their cars to other college students, I was thinking I'd love to know the insurance numbers on that. That sounds like an interesting game to be in.
That's exactly what happened, right? So our co-founders had to get really good at managing insurance and the risk and all that stuff. And then COVID hit. Of course, no one's going to college campuses. It killed the company. But a customer came back and said, hey, you know how you helped us with that insurance? Like, can you sell us that? Can you tell us how you did that? And then it dawned on him like, oh, hey, maybe we found something here. So again, they had no intent necessarily to do what we're doing now. But we found out later, hey, this is actually very, very good. And, the insurance world is archaic. Like, we should capitalize on this now.
Yeah. It's like seeing that, hey, actually, you know what? This is where our real value is. We thought it was here, but if we can do this, it's so much more valuable and probably much more lucrative in the market as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, these SDRs that you brought on, you said you had 4 join and then they jumped on the phones and 9 meetings came from that. So what I'm interested to know is, what are the most common outcomes of those early stage cold calls? Like, how long do they usually last? I imagine quite short, but I'm biased. I'm not sure. And then what are the most common outcomes? What's a good percentage? If I made, 100 calls today, how many should go to a meeting? How many should go to a next step? And what do the next steps really look like is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Again, it can vary by company, of course, and what you're selling and what you do. But for the most part, those first few meetings, like I said, they might not be the most qualified meetings, especially early on, because the SDR is super excited. Oh, I just got someone interested. And they'll just go for the meeting instead of kind of like digging in a little bit deeper. So again, the qualification rate may not be great, but you can also learn a ton from that. And an SDR can learn a ton from the AE telling them, hey, good job setting up this meeting. Here's why they weren't a good fit. Boom. Now the SDR knows, like, oh, okay, cool. I'll make sure to ask that next time. Or if I pick up on that, I'll dive into it and figure out if they're really a good fit or not. So it's not a bad thing. So yeah, the qualification rates might be a little low. But as far as like the math of sales, for cold calls, I'm a big cold call believer. I used to, well, I can get into that story in a little bit later. But so a good connect rate on average, and when I say connect rate, that means, when I dial the phone, I get to talk to someone that I would want to get on a meeting. So if I shoot for like maybe an 8 to 10% connect rate.
Okay.
Now, depending on the personas and where you're going from, or, maybe you can only call C executives for whatever it is you're selling. Like, obviously that connect rate is going to be a lot lower. But on average, for most things, a good connect rate is, 8 to 10%. So that means out of 100 calls, you're talking to 8 people. Now, after that, you have the connect to meeting rate.
Okay.
And a good percentage there is 20%. So, that would mean out of those 8 people, I got 20% of them to agree to take a meeting. And then you got the show rate. Okay, how many of those meetings actually showed up to the meeting and the meeting was held? Good percentage there is 70%. That's pretty standard. And then after that, it's qualification rate. I would think for the most part, average there is like 25 to 35%. If you've got a qualification rate there, then that's healthy.
Right.
Again, I've seen cases where, I've had an SDR struggle numbers wise, but their qualification rate was 100%. So on paper, you're thinking, wow, like everything you bring is awesome, but your numbers are low. It's because they're not getting a ton of at bats. And the AE would tell that SDR, hey, I only want decision makers. Like, bring me only decision makers. The AE was desperate. They wanted deals to close fast. So the SDR got too specific. So,
Right, I see.
yeah.
So it really depends on what you're selling then.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then what's the psychology behind these calls? Because you train up these SDRs, what is what way do you recommend them to kind of go into this? Because I know at the start I picked up when you said, our role is to generate interest. We're trying to generate interest around our product. We're not trying to be too complicated, be too specific and say, hey, we can do X, Y, and Z really well. Do you need this? But it's more to generate interest. So do they go in, with this kind of happy-go-lucky, like, hey, look, we got this awesome product. We just want you to check it out. We really think it could be a good fit for you. Could we get you on a call? Or I know a lot of this comes down to personality, but like, what's your kind of recommended mind frame going into these things?
Yeah. Curiosity. I think it's important to give a little bit of a blurb on what we do, but then you immediately pivot to asking them questions. So let them have an understanding on why you're calling them, and what it is that we do. Make sure that that's clear early in the call, and then pivot back to them. So, hey, if you don't mind me asking, if we go back to the example you talked about earlier, can you tell me how you're looking at all your marketing data? What's most important to you? What's the data telling you right now? Is there data that you don't have that you wish you had? Like, going into the call, like asking those questions, you're going to uncover what's important to them. And you might hear that, you know what, like, we just don't have anything that can show us resale data. Like, we just don't know what's going on there. Boom. If I had something that showed you that, would you be interested in learning more? Yeah, it'd be great. Cool. What's your calendar look like Thursday at 3? So curiosity. I'm not a huge script guy. Now, it's important to have a framework early on and give a framework to new SDRs who are just starting out and stuff. It can be super helpful. And again, everybody's different. Maybe some people need a script, some people don't. But confidence, by far, is what converts these people on the phone. If an SDR is not confident, it doesn't matter what they say, value prop, they could ask good questions. But if they're not confident over the phone, it's not going to convert. I could line up 10 top performing SDRs and we could listen to all their calls. And I guarantee you, they're probably all doing some sort of different framework.
Right.
But the one common denominator is confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I teach a lot. Like, I try and figure out why people aren't confident if, I hear them struggling. And then I try and focus in on that.
Okay.
Good story I can tell you on that. Had this individual. I think it's really important that your SDRs watch demos for what you're selling, because it builds up that confidence. So I had this SDR he's probably 3-4 months in. He started off good, and then it kind of dropped off a little bit. You could see the stress on him at his desk. Like, he's struggling, he's grinding, he's working hard, just not getting anywhere. Pulled him aside. Hey, man, what do you think's going on? What's wrong? What's struggling? Or why are you struggling? And he tells me, he's like, you know what, Ryan? I just don't feel like I'm confident in what we're selling and like how we're selling it. Like, I just don't feel like I understand exactly how we're doing this stuff. And then I asked him, I said, well, are you still watching your 2 demos a week? Usually that's my recommendation, is sitting in on an AE conversation for at least 2 a week. He said, well, no, I'm behind on my numbers. So I feel like I just got to keep grinding and keep going. I said, well, there's your problem. You're not confident. And so you've lost touch with how we're helping these people. Like, you need to go back to watching those meetings. He went back to watching the meetings. Numbers went right back up.
Wow.
Confidence all day long. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Just makes me think then about like the pressure of keeping up with numbers as opposed to following due process. Here's a process, stick to the formula, just do this and go out, show up every day and try. But then when it's like it can be extrapolated to general life, right? It's like when you have a routine and things are going well, everything starts going really well for you. And then, you fall a little bit behind on work. So you stop going to the gym or you stop exercising. And then you start falling behind on work as well more. And you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. You're like, well, what were you doing last month? Oh, well, I was training every day. I was eating healthy. I was waking up at this time. I was having some wind down time in the evenings. Are you doing those things now? No, I'm not doing them. Well, there's your answer. You might temporarily fall back on the work, but you'll come back stronger.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to know those 4 key metrics, right? What's the connect rate? What's the connect to first meeting, show rate, and qualification rate? That gives you a good understanding of where things are breaking down. For example, I could have a great connect rate, but my connect to first meeting might be low. Maybe it's only 10%. So then I know, okay, hey, they're not having a problem getting a hold of people. Not going to focus on that. They're not converting them once they talk to them. Are they struggling with objections? What's their opener like on their phone calls, etc. Show rate's low. Hey, what's your follow-up like when you set a meeting? Like, how are you setting expectation with these people getting off the phone? And then qualification rate, that's pretty, are we getting deep enough? Are we getting a good understanding?
How do you set that expectation for the show rate? You mentioned that.
Yeah. So I like to, as you're wrapping up a meeting or wrapping up a phone call, setting a meeting, always like to tell the prospect, hey, here's what to expect. I'm going to send you a calendar invite. Please make sure you accept it just so I know you got it. You always want to throw that in there. And then after I send you this calendar invite, I'll send you an email. I'll CC my teammate. I'll review in the email what we talked about today. And then depending on let's say you set this meeting like a week out, which typically also you want to aim for a 3-day period. If at all possible, set that meeting within 3 days, your conversion rate is going to be much higher. If it's outside of that, that's when things can get a little dicey. Not to say that the meetings won't happen, but they're more likely to happen if you set it within a 3-day window. But sometimes you have a choice, right? Like they just don't have the time. I got to take their word for it that they're going to be available next week. So go for it. But anyway, so then I'll tell them, all right, cool. I'll also send you an email the day before, just to review everything that we plan to discuss on that meeting. And in the meantime, if anything comes up for you that you have more interest in or have more questions about, feel free to email that to me. And then the morning of, I might just bump the calendar invite again, just so that's at the top of your inbox. And we look forward to seeing you there. So now they know, like, okay, this is what it's going to look
they're
like.
Expecting all these things. It's in their conscious mind.
Yeah, that's why they're sending me the email. Also, never, ever say, hey, I'll call you the day before and see if tomorrow is still good. No. Like, you're giving them an easy way out.
Yeah.
So You're never calling to confirm. You're never sending an email to confirm a meeting. Now you can confirm in a sense of like, hey, here's what we plan to talk about. We're really looking forward to spending the time together. We set this time aside for you. You almost want to make them feel like, oh man, okay, they set this time aside, like I can show up, right?
Yeah. I just interject there. I've had a similar experience with setting up podcasts, because when we first started out, we had a few people that were no-shows. And then we're like, right, so let's have a follow up the day before, or the day, or even 10 minutes before. I message you just 10 minutes before, right?
Yeah.
But then the way it's done is not, hey, just checking that you're still able to join the call. It's more like, hey, I'm really looking forward to speaking to you in 10 minutes. I've got a lot of questions, really curious to dig into. Something like that, right? And then they're like, okay.
Exactly. And who knows? They may be thinking of not showing up. And then they see that, they're like, oh, damn. Okay.
This dude put so much energy into it. I got to show up now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the game. That's the game we play.
Yeah, 100%. So Ryan, do you listen to the calls with your SDRs? Like, is that like, first of all, do you record every call? And then
we do.
You do? Okay. And then how often do you listen to them?
I need to listen to them more, honestly. I'm in building mode now, so I don't get to listen as much as I want. I would say you really want to listen to at least 2 or 3 dials a week from each of your SDRs.
Right.
And make it easy for yourself. Tell them, hey, by Friday or on Friday, send me a call you're proud of, and send me a call that you think you need some help on. Have the SDR do that. It makes your life easier rather than having to sort through all the calls and figure out which one do I want to listen to. Now, when I listen to them with SDRs, I try to listen to them real time with them. And the reason why is you want to be a coach, right? You don't want to just tell them, hey, this is where you messed up. So if I'm listening to it live with them, I'll usually get on a Zoom or something. I'll, share the recording. We'll go through the call. And when there's somewhere where I want to pause and talk about something, I'll pause it. And then I ask them, hey, what do you think about that? Mm-hmm. What do you think about that opener right there? Hey, what are you thinking right now? You heard them say this. What's going through your head right now?
Yeah.
And a lot of times the SDR will tell you exactly what you're thinking. And then they feel more invested in the call coaching because they're a part of it. And it's like an aha moment for them versus me just pausing it and say, okay, hey, here's what you did wrong. Boom. That's not cool for anybody.
Absolutely.
It's hard enough to make these cold calls. Again, this is the hardest job at most companies, no doubt. So yeah, you gotta coach these people up. Try and make it as fun as possible. Yeah, and give them coaching. That's what these folks are craving because they want to be an AE in most cases. Yeah. This is why I've stayed on the SDR side.
Interesting.
I love coaching. I love mentoring. And SDRs want it so bad. They want that coaching. They want that development. You get to the AE side of the house, they're kind of like, leave me alone. I got my, I just want to do my thing. I just, yeah. Some of your early stage AEs may crave some coaching and feedback, but after a while, they all get jaded and they want to do their own thing. But SDRs, they're a ton of fun to manage and coach up.
Mm-hmm. So then a part of this series is also about exploring different sales technologies. So when you say you record your calls, is that just through Zoom, like press and record on Zoom, or do you have like a CRM where it's integrated the call recording so everything's done automatically?
We have Dialpad, which is I guess they call it a VoIP, right? Internet phone line.
Yeah.
That records the calls. We also utilize Outreach. And so the calls, I can listen to them in Dialpad or Outreach, which is nice. Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Okay. And are there any other sales technologies that you guys are using that you found has enhanced the productivity of your teams?
Yeah. So huge plug for my Nooks family. Nooks is a software. Y'all will have to look it up. It's essentially a virtual office. It's awesome. Like,
is that NOOKS? Nooks?
Yep. Yeah. And I think their website's nooks.in. Let me just double check.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like a virtual office. So, I mean, literally think about people being in cubicles. Like, this is what Nooks can be. You can hop in your own little room, but you see everybody. And if I want to talk to someone, I can hop over and say, hey, what's up? Hey, I got this question. So it's really good to build culture. It speeds up the ramp for your reps because they're learning from each other. They can make dials together. They can listen to each other's calls. They can share their screen. So if you have a new hire, you could just have them shadow a rep. They can listen to them, see their screen share. That's been huge for us. And I've seen it do wonders in like building a team culture and camaraderie and everything in this virtual world that we live in. And when you're cold calling and you're an SDR, life can be pretty daunting if you're just these dials at home by yourself, getting hung up on, nobody to sit there and laugh with or tell a story with. I'm like, hey, listen to what this guy just told me. Like, all that stuff's very important for the development of an SDR. And that software helps. So, but if you have an office, I would say, having a hybrid environment is super important too. Because you want SDRs feeding off each other.
Right.
Back pre-COVID, I had Sonos speakers on our sales floor and we would crank jams. Like, you just want the energy on the floor.
Right. Okay.
And like, because with energy comes more like, all right, I'm going to keep going. If you're sitting in silence, it can be real easy to be like, man, I don't want to make this next phone call. I just got hung up on.
Yeah.
It's really important to me.
Yeah, man, you make such a good point, because I think sales is something that is so person to person, right? It requires high levels of empathy, requires, high levels of self-awareness as well, and also emotional management. Because I think we've all been there, right? When you're feeling down, you're just in the dumps about something, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, you're not a pleasant person to talk to that day, and people can tell.
Right. Yeah.
Some people more so than others. So if your job is literally to talk to people and get them interested, then your internal state is critical. Compare that with maybe a software developer or somebody who does a task that is very much them and a computer and nobody else. You can kind of just get into it and everything else goes away because it maybe is highly logic driven. Not saying sales is not logic driven, but there's a much larger emotional component there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we utilize Slack as well. Slack is huge for energy and just I encourage the SDRs, like, hey, shout out when you get a meeting. Shout out your teammates when you see them get a meeting. Again, energy is crucial for this role. One when I walked in at BetterUp, it was crickets in their Slack stuff. And I was just, oh no, we got to change this. It totally, turned upside down the culture there. It was a ton of fun.
That sounds like a task.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned that, SDRs getting hung up on some of the calls being short. It's generally being difficult because you're basically speaking to someone who's got no prior, might not necessarily have any prior interest in what you're doing, and they're unexpectedly taking your call. In that context, like, is there a best way to start the call? Like, I know the overall vibe of the call from the SDR should be curiosity, asking questions. Ideally, you want to be asking more questions than the prospect, and you want to be listening far more than you're speaking. But what about those first crucial 30 seconds when you take the call and you speak to them? Is there a formula for that?
You could hear different things from different people. Like you'll see people out there say, never ask how people are doing. They know you don't care. Like, that's not going to work. I mean, there's no silver bullet. Again, it comes with confidence, but I think a couple elements that do stand out and that are important early in the call: make it about them first. So a lot of times before I even introduce myself, I'll tell them why I'm calling them. Because the minute I introduce myself, they're immediately thinking, Ryan, LULA, do I know this guy? LULA, that's an interesting company. I've never heard of it. And they're tuning out everything else that I'm saying.
Yep.
Right. So, if I was calling you, I'd say, hey, Zaraj, I see that you have this awesome podcast. I'm really looking forward to getting to know how you operate and seeing if there's an area where, we could help you out. Here's what I do. I work for a company called blah, 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 and we do da, 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 da. So again, you hook them with oh, okay, they know what I do. There's a specific reason why they're calling me. Maybe you also throw in there, hey, we're working with, 2,500 other podcasters who do exactly what you do. And this is how we're helping them. Let me ask you, how do you handle blah, 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 blah? Mm-hmm. Right?
Gives you authority straight away. They're like, okay, this person knows that how my industry works. And if you can immediately display to me my problems that I'm facing in whatever industry I'm in, it's like, oh, not only has he told me about, the credibility that they have, but he's also elaborated to me by telling me my problem, which is a big problem. And the bigger that problem is to me, it's like, all right, I want to hear what you got to say.
Yeah. So again, context, why them? Asking them if they've heard about you is helpful. You want to again, develop that credibility. Hey, I'm not sure if you've heard of us or not. Are you familiar with LULA? No, I'm not. And then boom. Oh, okay. Well, real quick. So that's another thing I coach SDRs early on is, what are you going to say when they say they're not familiar with you? Mm. Because you could go into every call. I know what we do. What, bing, bing, bing. And then you get hit with that question of no, I have no clue who you are. And then you're like, oh, wow, we do a lot of stuff. What do I tell them? I wonder what they think would be interesting. But practice this line of hey, this is what I say every time when someone says they're not familiar with what we do.
Yeah.
And again, that develops that confidence and that tone where you're just comfortable. Hey, cool, no problem. Let me tell you what we do. So again, this is how we're helping similar companies to yours. And then immediately go back to them. Yeah. Don't fall into the trap of, Let me tell you how we're doing this. Let me tell you how we're doing that. No one wants to hear that, right? People like to talk about themselves. So again, it's important that they know why you're calling them and what it is that you do, so they know why you're asking these questions. But it needs to be short and sweet, and you can't fall into the feature selling, value prop selling. Like, we're not there yet. Like, let's figure out if there is an interest, if there is a need for the interest, all that good stuff.
I guess it does come around a bit full circle too, though. Like, because if you want them to know why you're calling them,
Yep.
you also want to know why you're calling them. So at least if they're going to ask you, so what do you guys do? You want to be able to say something relevant. So I guess so a little bit of prerequisite thought has to go into what you're going to say in that sentence before turning it back and asking them questions.
Exactly. So again, maybe that's where that you develop that value prop is like, what's the initial value prop that you want to introduce to somebody?
Like something general enough to pique interest, but not general enough to be like, no, I'm not looking for that. That's not my problem.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, that's really key insight there. It's a really nice way of thinking about it.
For sure.
It's like a hook, basically. You're trying to hook them.
Yep. Again, and you can do that pretty easily with just saying, we're helping X amount of companies very similar to yours achieve XYZ. I'm curious, what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
And then boom. Again, none of this stuff's a silver bullet, or I'd be a very rich man. But but for the most part, that'll get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess it's all about getting information. The more information you have from the market, the better.
Yep.
I guess we've got 5 more minutes here, Ryan, and I got one more question that I wanted to ask, because a lot of the people listening would be founders or people very early stage in their startup journey, or maybe a little bit later stage, but still doing some of the selling themselves. I guess what they could benefit from is when you have junior salespeople, or people that not necessarily junior, but people that haven't sold much in the past. They might be 30, 40 plus, but sales was never a big component of their work. What is the biggest mistake you see people new to sales make at this point when trying to get leads?
Overthinking. I think if they try and figure out, they could spend tons of time figuring out the perfect value prop, or they change a lot of what they're doing. I see that so much. Because again, this is a numbers game. This is like baseball. You get paid good money to fail a lot. And so you've got to fail, and you got to be comfortable with failing. But you've got to give that process enough time to really figure out if that's an issue or not. And that's why it's crucial to kind of look at the percentages over time. Like, that'll kind of tell you the things you need to know. But if you're constantly switching up, okay, that opener didn't work, I'm going to try this other one. Oh, that one didn't work either, so now I'm going to try this. Oh, that value prop wasn't good, I'm going to change it to this one. Like, again, you could say everything perfect, you could do everything great, but it just doesn't fit for that person. That person that answered the phone could be having a bad day. Maybe they just don't have the need for our product. Like, it doesn't mean that your pitch or your approach was wrong. So don't, again, not saying that you can't ever change things, right? You obviously need to make adjustments, but people tend to make adjustments too quick. And then that becomes really hard to coach and figure out, because you just don't know truly what's working and what's not working. So sometimes when I see people do that, I'll be like, hey, do me a favor. If you're comfortable with this flow, keep doing it. Yep. Let's keep doing that for a while. And over the course of time, let's see what things look like. So I think it's a pretty easy trap to fall into early on.
Yeah.
But you brought up something pretty interesting that I think is important for people to understand if they're building up a program like this or wanting to develop a sales development team. SDRs have a life of about 1.5 to 2 years. And then they're chomping at the bit to get that next role. So you got to be careful when bringing in experienced SDRs because they may burn out pretty quick.
Right.
Juniors, people right out of college, I've seen be very, very successful. I have one right now who is one of the top SDRs on the team, if not the top SDR of the team. And they just came out of college. I got another one that's also up there, straight out of college. Again, my whole team's great. There's a good mixed bag of experience and non-experience, but like, don't let inexperienced individuals scare you. Like, they're moldable. They want to prove themselves. That's a really good profile. If they're smart, genuine, hungry, gritty, hire them. Give them a shot. Yeah,
that's interesting. It's like, look at their potential rather than their previous experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Solid tip.
Yeah. So usually if I bring people in with an SDR background, like, I want to dive into, why they're looking to leave their current company. And then obviously what their performance has been like. But just where's their mindset?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. I've learned a lot. I mean, this has been a real, kind of deep dive on the world of SDRs and the top end of the sales funnel.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have as well. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today and having a conversation.
Yeah, of course. I'll reiterate this top of funnel is very, very important to a business. And I would say, as you begin to grow out your sales team, you should start with SDR first, because you want your SDRs to grow into your future AEs. So don't get too AE heavy before you start bringing SDRs in. Focus on SDR first. Of course, you'll need to bring in some AEs from the outside, but just know that, like, hopefully you're farming your future AEs from your SDR team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Super, super important. And again, I love telling stories. I'm a salesperson. We just launched a new product a month or so ago and just had a couple AEs working over there. And they were having trouble generating pipeline. And last week, we just made the pivot. Hey, let's throw our SDRs on this and see what happens. And we went gangbusters on, like, the AEs almost couldn't keep up with everything that we were sending their way. Totally changed that department and the flow over there. So again, I can't reiterate enough. This role is so crucial to a team and can propel your company pretty quickly with the right people.
100%. Yeah, and this is just so valuable to people that are doing multiple other things and don't have the mental capacity to really dial in on a sales strategy. So this kind of stuff is really valuable to hear.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, Ryan. Well, listen, man, I know it's morning over there. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Take care, bro.